Good evening to you. I'm glad to be with you again on this evening, and I'm glad for you to be here, so to speak. When Kyle's talking about saying something about Madison, let's just get this out of the way. All right? He married up. You understand what that is in the South? He married up. There's not one negative thing I can say about her. I will tell you this about her. As soon as she obeyed the gospel, as a matter of fact, we had like 5 or 6 girls, all the same age as Madison, Hannah, so forth. And as soon as they obeyed the gospel and I was in charge of Vacation Bible School, here's what I did. Instead of putting them in a teenage class, I said, "You're going to teach this year." And she's like, "Yes, I'm not going to be in a class, I'm actually going to teach." So she and my daughter actually taught a class of students. And what we do at home is we have a particular topic that you pick up and you make one lesson. And you have different age groups every day. You teach the same lesson on 5 different levels as it goes through the week. And it didn't balk. As a matter of fact, their classroom was the best classroom we had at that Vacation Bible School. She was talking about what people idolize. You know, like in the Old Testament, you bow down to idols, real images, and so forth. So she and Hannah collected a lot of things that people idolize today, like money and trophies and so forth, and then put this big curtain inside this room so you had to walk in with a maze. When you opened the door, you couldn't see in there. So it was a surprise when you walk behind the curtain and all of a sudden it looks like who knows what this is. But it was effective. I mean, I mourned when Kyle and Madison moved from Bethel to here, but I understood, well, you train them, you give them roots, and you give them wings. Because I knew wherever they went, they were going to do the Lord's work. And that's what we're about, isn't it? As a people. You know, when I've been at Bethel now 35 years, I've been fortunate to be there due to the fact that a lot of preachers don't stay at certain places very long, if you've ever figured that out. Some stay about 2, 3 years, 5 maybe at the most, and move on. But I've been privileged to watch the children that my wife taught in cradle roll class. And she still teaches cradle roll class and has been teaching that for 35 years. Okay? And I've done the weddings of a lot of these kids that my wife taught in cradle roll class. And now they have children. And their children are in my wife's cradle roll class. So it's almost like deja vu, you know, the circle of life. You know, I'm not going to stand up here and sing the Lion King, but you know the concept. Things just come right back around. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, you know, Kyle, but that's just the way I look at it. That's the way I see it. Okay, but it's a privilege. Matter of fact, thank you for the meal today. I know it was great. And also, when I got to the hotel this afternoon, there was this huge basket, this huge goodie basket. I don't know who was responsible for that, but let me tell you something. There's no way I can make a dent in that thing, so it's probably going to go home, and my grandkids will probably destroy it, to be honest with you. But thank you so much for that. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 10, "But by the grace of God I am what I am. And that grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain, but I labored more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God was with me." What I want to talk about tonight is a proper appreciation for the grace of God. There are a lot of qualities about God that you and I need to continually to study. Not that we don't know anything about God. Hopefully, being a Christian any length of time, you've come to know God in a very, very close way. We talk about the love of God and the holiness of God and the righteousness of God and the mercy of God, the wrath of God. But tonight I want to talk about the grace of God. I want to start this lesson not so much with 1 Corinthians 15:10, as that's sort of just the launching pad. I want to give you a secular illustration about being given something and how to really appreciate it. At home at Bethel, we have a lady. She's single. She's never been married. She's still single, never been married. And she's about my age. I won't tell you how old that is. She's about my age. And she had kidney failure. And she went to dialysis 3 days a week for months and months and months. And the doctor told her, her urologist told her, that ultimately, even the dialysis is not going to solve the problem. Ultimately, your body is going to develop certain other problems due to the fact that you have renal failure. So you are in need of a kidney transplant. You're going to have it. Well, she started trying to find a match. Who in her family, your bloodline becomes the first place you look. And there was hope that one of her nieces would be a match, and it looked like she was. But down the road, what happened was that something came up, and they're not going to be able to take her niece's kidney, though she volunteered to give her aunt a kidney. So in Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville, she got on the list, and she was told that if one becomes available, when we give you the call, you get in your car, you have your bag already packed, you get in your car and you get here right now. I mean, don't wait till the sun comes up the next day. As soon as we give you the call, you get in your car and you come, because immediately, within less than 12 hours, you're going to be on the operating table. Well, she got the call. It was a young man somewhere in his 20s, was tragically killed, don't know exactly how. His life was snuffed out. And he was a match to our sister in Christ. She got the call, she was elated. She was elated, but it was sort of bittersweet, because she realized somebody had to die here in order that I might live, might have a quality of life. So when she got to the hospital at Vanderbilt, immediately she went under the knife. They placed the kidney into her body, and immediately it started functioning like it was her own body. And she hasn't been to dialysis since. She got a brand new lease on life. She is looking death in the face, folks. Literally looking death in the face. Just a matter of time. And now the past is in the past. When I saw her, when I walked into her hospital room the day after she had had her procedure, she was just beaming. You couldn't wipe the smile off that girl's face. And I thought, well, how do you feel now? She said, I don't have to go to dialysis ever again as far as this is concerned. She's got some other health issues, but that one is in the past. Now, what would you think of a person like that if all of a sudden she finds out who this young man was, or this young man's family, and let's say that young man's family had a need that she could supply. She could do something for this family. What if she found out about that, and then all of a sudden someone said, you know, you received that kidney from that family's son, that man, that woman's son, and they need some help. Why don't you pitch in? Obviously, you've got to. And she says, well, you know, I'd like to. I'll pray for them, but I sure hope they get what they need. Now, what would you think of a person who's been given this new lease on life and then turn around and not do anything for somebody like that? You say, you ingrate, right? You think you're entitled to that kidney? Here is someone who's in their 20s now, is not alive. And that donor gave you back your life. Well, folks, we all had a donor. And there is one who did for us what you and I could never do for ourselves. He didn't just do it for everybody in this room. He did it for this whole planet, for everybody that's ever lived, from Adam and Eve all the way down. His name's Jesus Christ. And if what he's done for me and you has not changed our lives, we need a checkup from the neck up. When God devised the plan of salvation, God did not devise the plan of salvation based on meritorious works. Have you ever thought about why? Because there are some world religions that base their plan of salvation on meritorious works. I can name you several. Now, what does meritorious works literally produce in the heart of a person? What kind of attitudes does that develop? For 10 years, back several decades ago, I was a scoutmaster for a Boy Scout troop in Limestone County. Both of our boys went through the program, and I had 13 Eagle Scouts to come through that program. By the way, I wouldn't recommend Boy Scouts right now based upon the policies that are going on, particularly with that organization. And if you know what I mean by that, you know what I mean by that. If you don't, I'll talk to you afterwards and explain. But they have these little cloth discs. They're circular. And you get this green sash that goes across one shoulder down to the opposite hip. You know what those little green claws are called? They're called merit badges. Merit badges. And all of a sudden, you got to have 21 of them, by the way, to even be an Eagle Scout. And you can have more than that, but you got to have a minimum of 21. Now here's a young boy, he's 11 years old. He hasn't been in the Scouts long, and by the way, the first thing he buys is that sash. That's the first thing he's wanting to wear. And all of a sudden, he starts off in a little merit badge, and next thing you know, he earns it. He does all the requirements for it, so we have the ceremony, and I give him this cloth patch. And his mama immediately, because he's not going to let her go to bed without it, she's going to sew that on that sash. Well, here's a boy, he's 16. You know, he's already past first class. He's probably Heart or Life Scout or anything along that. He's close to Eagle. And the next thing you know, he's got 18 or whatever. Well, when you line up these boys, this one's got 18 on a sash, and this one's got 2. 2. Do you think the guy with 18 looks down on the little boy that's got 2? I guarantee you it's been done. 18 sort of just puffs his chest out, so it makes it even look bigger. And this little boy over here, he thinks, by the way, he's won something big time, just to have 2 on there. And I keep reminding these boys with these badges, I said, I know you've got more than he does, but let me tell you something. He worked as hard on that badge right there than some of the badges I can show you, like basketry. You know that little merit badge you got in summer camp called basketry? You worked 3 hours for that. 3 hours. And by the way, where's your basket? Where's your product now? All you did was to do 3 hours so you could get that piece of cloth. Now this kid over here, he's done Family Life Merit Badge. I tell you, the requirements for that are 3 months. It took you 3 hours, took him 3 months. So we're not comparing apples to apples here. And he may have some badges that he has to work harder for because he wants to achieve something that you don't even want to try. Just be glad with what you've got. And don't look down on somebody who one day may very well eclipse everything you've ever done. What I learned with merit badges is this: it fosters pride, haughtiness, looking down on people that don't have what you have. A meritorious system of salvation makes a person look at another person entirely differently. God, I thank you, you didn't make me like other men. By the way, that's a person that lived by a meritorious work system, a Pharisee. The Apostle Paul used to be one of those folks. Acts 23 says, Paul said, I'm a Pharisee. I was the son of a Pharisee. His daddy was that way. And Paul has gone from a system of meritorious works under a perverted side of the law of Moses all the way to this system. By the grace of God, I am what I am. I didn't pull myself up by my bootstraps. It is by the grace of God that I am what I am. If it weren't for the grace of God, I wouldn't be what I am or have what I have. Anything. I remember one day in that classroom right there that I'm pointing to against that back wall, on the other side of that back wall. Uncle Franklin raised this question: could God have saved man in just any old way? This was in that preacher's class on Monday morning. And I think, well, God's God. He can do whatever he wants to do. He's going to do the right thing. And he started talking about salvation by grace through faith. He said, have you ever thought about why God set up a system of salvation by grace through faith instead of by meritorious works or some other system? He said, meritorious works fosters arrogance. And there can be no pride in heaven. It was pride that cast Satan out of heaven, folks. He didn't have the lust of the flesh. He didn't have any flesh in heaven. It's a spiritual being. We have the problem with the lust of the flesh. That wasn't Satan's problem. You know, one of the qualifications of an elder, not a novice, lest being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. By the way, those of you who are elders in this congregation and now serving as an elder, hadn't been an elder all that long versus the preaching that I've done, but I'm going to tell you something. This is a job, it's not a title. It's a work. Preacher is a work. Deacon is a work. Sunday school teacher is a work. Work of an elder is a work. It's a good work. As a matter of fact, it's a very good work, very important work. Don't let it go to your head. And I don't think you do. I know you've heard enough preaching here over the decades, all the way back into the 20th century. I hate to say that, we are in the 21st century. All the way back into the 20th century that basically says everyone is in desperate need of God and His goodness, and no one is self-sufficient. And 1 Corinthians 15:10 would have been quoted from this pulpit before, many times. The system of salvation by grace through faith was to do something to man's heart. It was to change attitudes. It was to develop such a mindset that when man got to heaven, he wouldn't even think about trying to overthrow God. He is in such appreciation for what God through Christ has done for him. All he wants to do is worship Him. That's all he wants to do. So tonight I'm here as quick as I can and as efficiently as I can to talk about what grace means to me and you. What is the effect that salvation by grace through faith has on us? You are familiar with the idea, right? Ephesians chapter 2, 8 and 9. Actually, I'd go all the way to verse 10. For by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God has before ordained that we should walk in them. In the 4th chapter of Romans, in verse 16, when he's talking about Abraham, was Abraham saved by works? No. Abraham was saved by the faith that he had. Well, why was it by faith? Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace, that the promise might be made to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who's the father of us all. And I take you to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, 1 and 2. What does it say? Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it, the elders, the ancient ones, obtained a good report. Good report from whom? God. For without faith, it is impossible to please Him. For he that comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is a reward of them that diligently seek Him. Well, Brother Clark, give me an example of what you mean by those in the Old Testament that were saved by grace through faith. By faith, Abel. By faith, Enoch. By faith, Noah. By faith, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Sarah. Who is that? They lived under patriarchal law, did they not? That's patriarchal law. You know how from Abel all the way down, and I might even include Adam and Eve, do you know how particularly Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, you know how they're going to get to heaven? By grace through faith. That's how they're going to get to heaven. By grace through faith is not a New Testament concept. It's an Old Testament concept. It has always been that way. It's always going to be that way. You go then to Hebrews 11, and then all of a sudden you start talking about Moses, right? Then you talk about the children of Israel crossing the Red Sea. And then you talk about them going around the walls of Jericho. And And then you start talking about people like David and Samuel and Samson and Jephthah. Well, who are these folks? That's under the law of Moses, folks. They lived under the law of Moses. They didn't live under patriarchal law. So how do Moses, the children of Israel that came out of Egypt, all the way to David, who lived under, how do these people, how are they going to get to heaven? By grace, through faith. That's how they're going to get to heaven. And then when you come to the New Testament system, what are you looking at under the law of Christ? Salvation is still by grace through faith. From the Garden of Eden to the end of this life, God's only system of salvation was by grace through faith. By the way, faith is not simply mental assent. By faith, Abel offered. By faith, Enoch walked. By faith, Noah built an ark. By faith, Abraham obeyed, not going out, not knowing where he went. You understand, faith means do what God tells you to do to show that you've got faith. By the way, how do you even know I've got faith? Well, you're a preacher. It sort of goes without saying. You know preachers can be hypocrites. Did you know that? Years ago, when I was preaching at a different congregation where I am, a little congregation called Neal Church of Christ. You can't get there from here, by the way, unless you're lost in Morgan County. There was a gentleman in Morgan County that wanted to hold a gospel meeting at Neal. Now, there weren't any elders at the Neal congregation when I was there. Still don't have any to this day. That's a tragedy, but that's another story. And there was a gentleman who lived in Hartselle, Alabama, and he wanted to hold a gospel meeting at Neal. But they knew he held a particular position that was divisive in our brotherhood. And so one gentleman said something to him about, he wants to hold a gospel meeting. He says, why don't you invite me to hold a gospel meeting? They said, well, how do you stand on this position? And here's what he literally said: I can preach it either way. Did you hear that? I can preach it either way. Which way do you want it? I can preach it either way. Let me tell you something. I could do a mock debate tonight. You know what a mock debate is? It literally means to take the side of a position that